native Africans of America. That's what you should be calling yourself. See, if you tell me that I do not descend from enslaved Africans, I descend from the original Africans who came to America, I have no problem with that. If you tell me I do not descend from the enslaved African, I descend from the original Africans who came to America millennium before Columbus, I have no problem with that. I have no problem with that. You say, Doc, I am a descendant of the original African tribes in America. I have no problem with that. But that's not what y'all teach. That's not what you pretendians teach. You pretendians teach that you are not African. You have no African DNA. That's a problem. Let me tell you why that's a problem. And I don't care about y'all hating on me on Clubhouse. They've been hating on me on YouTube, and I'm still number one. I'm still that. Listen, I don't care how many Clubhouse groups y'all start trying to take down the champion of black consciousness. They did it on YouTube, and I'm still here, and I'm still number one. That's right. That's right. Most degrees, most supporters, most requested. Stop playing with me. Only one with an institution, because you know we bought the whole block. Y'all talking about buy the block back? We bought the whole block. Frederick Douglass, Marcus Garvey, we bought the whole block. Stop playing games. But here's the problem for you pretendians who say, I'm a Native American, but I'm not African. Here's the problem. The original Americans were African. Vasco Nunez da Gama. Look up the European. Vasco Nunez da Gama. Go look him up. Go look him up. That European said when he showed up in the Americas, the Native Americans told him that the original people were African. Don't believe Dr. Umar. Go look up and see what the white man said who came here. Columbus was not the only European who said, quote unquote, Negroes were in the Americas. Negroes was in the Caribbean. Oh, yes, go look it up. They was using the word Negro at that time. Yes. Columbus said he found Negroes in the Caribbean. Vasco Nunez da Gama said not only did he find Negroes in America, he said that the Native Americans told him that the original people were Africans. Don't believe me, go do your research. But here's the problem you pretendians are going to run into. Here's the problem you pretendians are going to run into. If the original Americans were African and you are not African, that automatically means that you are a descendant of the red man. The red Native American, not the black Native American. See, the black Native American is the African, and they were here first. The black Native American was the African, and they were here first. The red man was not here first. The red man is the amalgamation of the Asiatics who came over, mixing with the original African to make the red. So when you say I'm not African, you cannot be the original Native American. When you say I am not African, you cannot be the original Native American. You can't have it both ways. You are either African and you are the original Native Africans of America, because if you're telling me you're not African, you descend from the red man. So you are a descendant of the red native, not the black native. So if you are a descendant of the red native, you cannot be aboriginal. You cannot be aboriginal. You cannot be indigenous to America because the red Native American was not here first. He is a mixture of the Asiatics and the original Africans. So which way do you want to play this? Which way do you want to play this? Are you a descendant of the original Africans of America? Or are you a descendant of the red people who are a mixed race group who are also of African DNA? Make up your mind. Make up your mind, pretendians. Y'all got a lot of questions y'all need to answer now. Got a lot of questions y'all need to answer, because you do know the European anthropologists found skulls of African people in the Almic. In the Almic discoveries, there were skulls. Don't believe me, go do your research. Everything I'm saying, go find it. If the Olmecs were not an African, and if the Olmecs were not influenced by African, how in the hell did they find African skeletons in the same areas where they found the Olmec heads? Help me out. You want me to keep going? Let's keep going. How about in the pyramids of ancient Kemet, Nile Valley, Africa? In the pyramids of ancient Kemet, Nile Valley, Africa, they found smoking products, nicotine and tobacco, varieties of nicotine and tobacco that were grown in Mexico. How did they end up in the pyramids? I'll tell you how. Let me help you out. The Greek historian Herodotus, the Greek father of history, Herodotus, said that Ramses III, the Greek philosopher Herodotus said Ramses III took large groups of ships out to the open ocean and sea, and he sailed the four corners of the globe. I'm going to say it again. Herodotus said Ramses III was the captain of a large body of ships that sailed to the four corners of the earth. Lord have mercy. Y'all got some problems now. Y'all got some explaining to do, pretendians. Y'all got some explaining to do, pretendians. Here's the other thing. Last thing for the pretendians, and I'm only talking about the pretendians because they done made 1 million clubhouse groups trying to defame the character of the most popular black scholar in the world. They don't know YouTube already tried it and they failed. Y'all gonna fail. You can't stop this. I keep telling you, this is God-given. This is God-given. Last point for the pretendians. Most Native American tribes, and when I speak of Native American, red tribes, I'm talking about the red man, not the black man. The black man is the original Native American. The black man is the original Native American. The red man comes later. The black man of Africa is the original Native American. The red man comes later. Here's what you need to understand for all my descendants of red natives, non-African Native American Negroes. To my non-African Native American Negroes, I want you to know this so you don't look stupid. Many of the red Native American tribes on the reservations, many of the red Native American tribes on the reservations will not accept you as one of them genetically if you don't have a Native American grandparent. Some of the red tribes require 25% ancestry. That means a grandparent must have been a red Native American. I'm going to say it again. I'm trying to help you so you don't look stupid when y'all go out there, because y'all being miseducated by these YouTube people. I'm going to say it again. Many of the Native American tribes will not consider you a descendant of their red nation if you are not 25% Native. That means you have a full-blooded red Native American grandmother or father. Most of you don't have that. Most of you don't have that. Most of you do not have a full-blooded red Native American grandparent. So you're going to lose. Number two, some tribes require that you be 1/16 Native American. That means one of your great-great-grandparents must be a full-blooded red Native American. because the black Native Americans are Africans. They the originals. The Reds are not original. Okay? So you better start putting your family tree together. You better start putting your family tree together. Okay? You got 4 grandparents. Some tribes want one of your 4 grandparents to be a full-blooded red native. Right? You got 8 great-grandparents. You got 16 great-great-grandparents. Most tribes will at least require one of your 16 great-great-grandparents to be a full-blooded red Native Americans. Most, at least, at the bare minimum, the softest requirement, some tribes will require 1/16 Native American blood, meaning you have a red Native American great-great-grandparent. Okay? So, for you Negroes who don't know your ancestry, you better start putting your ancestry together. I'm trying to help you out. You don't want to be black, you want to be red, no problem. But you better start shaking that family tree. You better get them names, because you're going to have to prove the way that these red natives, because remember, y'all not from Africa, so we're not talking about the black Native Americans of America. Because the black Native Americans of America are Africans. We're not talking about them because y'all said y'all not from Africa. So if y'all not from Africa, you don't belong to the indigenous American population. Since y'all not from Africa, you don't belong to the Aboriginal Native American population, because the indigenous Aboriginal Native American population were Africans, but you not from Africa. So that automatically means you are a descendant of the red natives who come later. Right? Sister just says she Cherokee. Are you sure you belong to Cherokee, or were you owned by the Cherokees? Let me ask the question again. I want you to understand, overstand, and understand. When you tell me you are Cherokee, are you telling me that you belong to the Cherokee Nation, or did the Cherokee Nation own your damn grandparents? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Because the Cherokees were a slave-owning red Native nation. The Choctaws were a slave-owning red Native American nation. The Seminoles were a slave-owning red Native American nation. The Creeks were a slave-owning red Native American nation. So when you say you are Cherokee, you might be telling me that you happy to have been a slave of the Cherokee. When you tell me you Seminole, you might be telling me that you happy to be the slave of the Seminole. Oh, you better do your history. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Just because you got Cherokee blood doesn't mean you belong to the Cherokee Nation. Just because you have Cherokee blood doesn't mean you belong to the Cherokee Nation. It could very well mean that the Cherokees owned your great-great-great-great-grandparents, and one of the Cherokee men raped your great-great-great-great-grandmother, and that's how you got Cherokee blood. Just like Africans in America, just because we got European blood don't mean we belong to the European kingdoms. The reason we got European blood is the slave master raped our mothers. That didn't make us European. So just because your great-great-great-grandmother was owned by the Choctaws, or your great-great-great-grandmother was owned by the Cherokees, or your great-great-great-grandmother was owned by the Seminoles, don't mean you Seminole, don't mean you Cherokee, don't mean you Choctaw. It just means that the owner slept with his property. The Cherokee owner slept with his property. The Choctaw owner slept with his property. The Seminole owner slept with his property, and that's how you got the blood in your body. Y'all got some explaining to do. Y'all got some explaining to do. And when you go to prove you Native American, you better have your whole ancestry together. You gotta show documents. You cannot walk into the United States Congress. You cannot walk into the United States Congress. You cannot walk into a hearing before the Cherokee Nation or the Seminoles or the Choctaws or any of the other hundreds of Native American tribes and say, my grandmom told me I was a Cherokee. My granddaddy told me I was a Choctaw. My great-great-grandmom told me I was a Seminole. That's not going to cut it. That's not going to cut it. Oral tradition is not going to get you a place at the table. Furthermore, what y'all need to know about these racist red Native American tribes. Furthermore, what y'all need to know about these racist red Native American tribes, they don't mess with y'all. The 5 tribes, the 5 major tribes owned slaves. The 5 major tribes fought with the Confederacy for slavery. The 5 major tribes fought with the Confederacy for slavery. And even if you can prove that you have their blood, does not make you a part of their nation. And when they started getting those casinos, do you know that when they started getting the casinos, they wrote into their treaties and constitutions that no African American, even if they have the blood, do your research, no African American, even if they have the blood, can lay claim to anything that they have. See, this is why we're building the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy for African children. This is why we need independent schools. I'm not from Africa, but I'm a Native American. You damn fools. That automatically means you are not indigenous to America. You are not Aboriginal to America, because the red natives were not the first Americans. The Africans were, and they even said it. Go read Vasco da Gama. Go read him. He said the natives told him that the blacks from Africa were the first here. You ain't got to listen to me. Go read Herodotus and see what he said. Africans were selling the high seas since Nile Valley culture. What's wrong with you people? So now, since you're not from Africa, see, it would have been better to say you was one of the original native African tribes in America. That would have been better. But you cut yourself off from Africa because you hate yourself. Your self-hatred has messed up your whole agenda. Because since you cut yourself off from Africa and you're not one of the original native African tribes, you now automatically have to prove you belong to the red natives who don't want your ass. Now you got to prove you belong to the red natives who don't want your ass. You bet some of y'all, you better have a red grandparent. You better have a red grandparent. And most of you better have at least a red great-great-grandparent. You better have their names. You better have some death records, some birth records. And even then, they're not going to let your ass in. Because, see, here's where y'all missing the point. Here's where you're missing the point. You have 256 7 times great-grandparents. You have 256 7 times great-grandparents. Every human being on the planet Earth has 256 7 times great-grandparents. If you have 256 7 times great-grandparents, if one of them is a red Native American, if 2 of them is a red Native American, if 5 of them is a red Native American, if 10 of them are red Native Americans, how does that stop you from being an African? When you got 200 African great-great-grandparents, you got 56 red Native American great-great-grandparents, and Africans have the strongest DNA, the oldest ancestry, the most powerful chromosomes, and you got 200 of them. You got 56 mixed race red Native American ancestors. How in the hell can the minority wipe out the majority? That's my question to you. If I find out I have a white Irish great-grandparent, that don't make me Irish. If I found out that I have a Chinese great-great-grandmother, that don't make me Chinese. If I find out I have a Mexican, a yellow Mexican great-great-great-grandmother, that doesn't stop making me an African. I'm trying to understand how you Negroes, I'm trying to understand how you Negroes will have a handful of non-African ancestors in your family tree. I'm trying to understand how you can have a handful of non-African ancestors in your family tree. And because you have a handful of non-African ancestors, you ain't black no more. Does that make any damn sense? Does that make any damn sense? Let me get off of that. Let me get off of that. That's not important.
Drums.